It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, by George, I think he's got it. Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. Every time I get ready to do one of these shows, I think about the miracle of technology. Folks, we're going to go live to Kyiv. We're going to talk to our good buddy, our good pal out there, Serge Tiagniryadno. He's a singer, songwriter, and musician, and he's returning to the podcast by George live line. Let's bring that up on screen. There he is. He's a world-renowned Ukrainian singer, musician, songwriter, and sound engineer. I think a lot of times that gets lost even on my show because we talk to him, and he's very up on current affairs, very knowledgeable about the situation in his hometown there and the war as it affects him and the world. But this guy is an outstanding, world-renowned musician. I mean, he is known by the biggest names in the business, folks. From the age of 13, he's been performing on the stage. He regularly works as a session instrumentalist and vocalist as well. Since 2008, he manages the Crystal Sound Recording Studio, which in addition to its own projects, creates many Ukrainian and international audio projects. That's where he's spending his time now, folks. He's a holdout in his hometown of Kyiv, Ukraine. His wife and kids left the country for safety, but he remains and provides a firsthand account of life in the capital city under siege from Russian attackers. It's been bad, and it's getting worse, and that's kind of where I wanted to go here to start with. We'll bring him in right after I take a spin through this most recent news. Now, this is from the Associated Press. Nighttime Russian air campaign terrorizes Kyiv citizens, and it's changed to a little bit more daylight. But let me bring this up on screen big enough so that I can read it. And it says, well, and I love that photo there. It shows, the kids, kind of that'd be a drive-in movie theater or something in America, for God's sake. But that's what they're dealing with in Ukraine. Looking up in the recent escalation of Russian attacks, it says Ola Bukno, 65, she's a cleaner, says a prayer every night. Please, she asked, closing her eyes and addressing the heavens, let it be quiet. By her bedside is a bag packed full of essentials, documents, dry foods, and water. At the sound of the alarm, she dashes downstairs to her building's basement and takes shelter. Nearly 2 weeks ago, debris from a shot-down missile landed on the roof of a building next to hers in Kyiv's Dantizha district, causing a large fire. Every night we are afraid, she said, tearing up. When the alarm blares, some of the city folks, they're consumed with fear, imagining the worst case scenarios that could unfold. Displacement, being trapped under rubble, being killed. Others embrace apathy. I mean, like they just, whatever will be. C'est la vie, folks. Lying awake in bed as the sounds of explosions ricochet across the skies. For many in the city, the sound of the air and alarm is accompanied by the constant ring of Telegram, the preferred app in Ukraine for sharing updates about the airstrikes. With every update, another coming from the east, more launched from the sea, take cover, stuff like that. People respond with an emoji expressing expletives, as you can well imagine. Now, this is Mariana Yavlina, a physical therapist, had the misfortune of moving to the residential compound in that city the day of the attack. She returned to her new apartment after midnight that night. The air raid alarm was blasting. Well, she'd had enough. She lay on her sofa and looked up at the ceiling. Her first moment's rest from the long day. In the distance, explosions resounded. One then another. She looked at the telegram up for updates. Kind of like the way that this is written. I'm going to get out of this very quickly. Here's the last paragraph. It says, soon firefighters and police arrived at the scene, forbidding anyone to take video of the wreckage. But Yavelina filmed anyway and sent the footage to a friend serving in the army. I highlighted this because, man, when you start keeping people from filming and videoing and reporting, I'm not too much up with that. I mean, they're at war. I get that. But I'm a free speech. I mean, I'm an absolutist when it comes to this type of thing. Anyway, the person in the army that you sent it to said just flowers. That's how he responded. A local idiom meaning it could have been much worse. And we're going to talk about that as well. Let me get that off the screen. Let me put that away. Let me click a couple of buttons here. This one here and that one there. And there he is, folks. There's our good buddy, our good pal in Kyiv coming on live here. It is Serge. Hi, pal.
Hello, George. Nice to see you.
Yeah,
Hello,
thanks for coming in
everybody.
there. That story is kind of written in a melodramatic fashion. I mean, it's a good read. It's supposed to be that way. How accurate is that? Are your neighbors, your friends, your people in the city there, are they sleepless under siege? That's the way I titled the show. Or are they not getting
Well,
sleep? Are they scared during the day? What's the vibe?
well, that depends on person. Well, uh, first of all, the story that you just told, the district called Darnica, and that's actually my home district in Kiev. And the reason why they not letting people to film the destruction and the places where missiles or drones hit it or fall down, that's because this thing, these photos, these footages, they help to correct the targets for Russian sites. So that's highly prohibited, and you can go to jail if you're filming the uh, destroying of the Russian missile. If they will see it on the feed on Facebook, they will know exactly where the missile was destroyed. They will know where our air defense systems are placed, so that's pretty much dangerous for us. Um, uh, about the question who's sleeping, who's not, well,
Yeah.
it depends on the person. Well, me, most of the time, I didn't woke up during these explosions. If it's near me, obviously, I can open one of my eyes to check if I'm still alive and go to
Yeah.
sleep. But few weeks ago, my older son Dania, he came to me in Kiev. He thinking about returning to Kiev. He is finishing school here, and that was a reason for me to stay awake during night attacks, because, well, I have a son in next room, and I should be probably I should be awake during the attacks, but he's sleeping well. He doesn't wake up.
Yeah. I got to admit, I like to play hockey, and I kind of fancy myself a tough guy, but you're tough, man. I don't normally think of musicians as being that way. If it was me, I'd be curled up in a fetal position in a basement under a desk, probably. I can't believe that you've been doing this now for 2 years on, and that leads me to I wanted to talk about you just had a birthday. What's it like
Yeah,
having a
I did.
birthday at war? I mean, you had to reflect on that.
Well, I'm joking that I had a most expensive fireworks ever. Because it was during the entire day. They started at night, probably at 3 a.m. Then they continued. There were no attacks during the daytime since probably New Year. And there was the attacks during the entire day, and at last after midnight they attacked again. So I had a lot of explosions, a lot of fireworks in the sky, so that was fun.
That was all for you. It was for your birthday. Yeah,
Well, well,
yeah.
yeah. Well, unfortunately, during the first attack, and probably that was the story that you've been reading, few people injured and one dead. So that was a very sad thing. But uh, anyway, it happens during the May. It was like each 2 days we had almost the same attack. It probably was the most massive attack,
Yeah.
but 10 drones, 5 missiles, 11 missiles each 2 days. We had this.
Let me bring some things up on screen here. I like to work through these, and people think, well, that's just George, that's just Sergey, that's just what they think. Well, I want to tell you something, folks. This is the most propagandized war in the history of the world, probably because of all the digital electronic media and all that type of thing. The stuff that comes out of Russia, and I mean, nobody believes that. Sergey is given that an ounce of credit, but even from the Ukrainian and the West side, and our government, I mean, we don't know whether or not to believe these things. And I wanted to bring this up on screen and get to some of these stories. The Ukraine war, fresh attacks on Kyiv after an intense drone barrage. That's what Siri was talking about here. And for people that are watching in video, what is this thing on the ground? You got any idea? Is this a bomb, a
Well,
missile? What is
I'm
that?
not sure. I'm not an expert, but well, that's either parts of the drone that was destroyed by our air defense system, or either it's parts of the missile also
Okay.
destroyed. Because if the missile or drone is hitting the target, whatever it is, we won't see any parts.
All right, let me bring this up on screen here so that I can read it. I got to get it bigger because it's too small. Russian missiles have hit Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, following 2 nights of heavy drone strikes. They were all reportedly shot down. There are no reports of casualties reportedly shot down. Flaming debris from the intercepted missiles landed in a residential area in central Kyiv. And this is what the folks there are howling about. They're striking residential areas, civilians. Russia has launched 16 air attacks from the Ukrainian capital this month. The latest, however, was unusual because it took place during the day and seemed to be targeted at the city center. And it's hard for me to get my head around this. These things coming in during the day. Can you see these things coming through the air? I mean, have you
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
drones flying over yeah, what's that like?
Not this time, but a few nights ago I saw, because they flew from mine side of the city, and well, I saw a few of them.
Good
Well,
Lord.
not drones, but the moment when they exploding in the air.
And we're getting a lot of comments. A lot of people just they follow Serhiy and his reporting. I like to call it, because that's really what it is that he's doing there from Ukraine. And here's some more reporting. Let me bring this up on screen, because a lot of people don't believe something unless it comes to the New York Times. But I would caution you: the New York Times has been wrong aplenty in the past. But here's what they're saying is happening right now: live updates. Drone strikes damage buildings in Moscow as Kyiv is hit again. The drone attack in Moscow was a potent sign that the war is increasingly reaching the heart of Russia. It came as an aerial assault on Ukraine's capital, left at least one person dead. At least 8 drones targeted Moscow early Tuesday. Now, that's just yesterday, according to the Russian authorities. Now, remember what I said earlier about according to Russian authorities, folks. Every word means something. Think about where you're getting your information here. But that's what the Russian authorities say. The first attack to hit civilian areas in the Russian capital, and a potent sign that the war is increasingly reaching the heart of Russia. The assault came after yet another overnight bombardment by Russian forces of the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, which has faced a barrage of attacks in recent weeks that have put the city on edge and tested the country's air defenses. Kyiv was attacked with at least 20 drones early Tuesday, the New York Times is reporting, leaving one person dead and unnerving, exhausted residents. Now, I highlighted this, and I wanted to get your take on this, Serhiy, because this seems to be a big part of this. The dueling strikes reflected the dialed up tension and shifting priorities ahead of Ukraine's expected counteroffensive. Ukraine has increasingly been reaching far into Russian held territory, while Moscow has been adjusting its tactics in an effort to inflict significant damage on Kyiv. Okay, so you know me, I'm a peacenik. I'm way out here on the left, and I tell you, oh man, toil and trouble, war, it's all bad. This is what happens. I mean, we escalate, they escalate. It looks like it's getting worse. But then again, is this accurate? What's your take on all of that?
Well, I cannot see where Russian Federation can escalate this war further. They did pretty much everything except the nuclear weapon, but well, nobody knows if it's still working, because it's inherited from Soviet Union times, and you know how high technology as were in Soviet Union. But of course, this was actually probably the first strike of the Moscow, and you should understand that Moscow is situated like almost 1,000 kilometers from Ukrainian-Russian border, and it's like 600 miles. And well, and they destroyed drones only in Moscow, so they flew all the way from Ukrainian border if it was if it were our drones. But these drones wasn't filled with explosion, as I understand, because there were even the drone that hit the building in Moscow, it just stuck in a window. Nothing happened. But well, that just shows that we have some weapon that can reach Moscow, and of course, the main aim there is Putin himself, because probably that will help us if he will be destroyed. It will help to get rid of the Russian troops. It won't stop the war, obviously, but it will help a lot for our people to not be in a constant fear of shellings like we had it during past 500 of days, and uh, it will save a lot of lives of Ukrainian.
And of course, this was an act of aggression. I mean, by Russia. They were the ones that initiated this. They invaded Ukraine. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We can debate whether or not they were provoked and whether or not something should have been done to prevent it. But I wanted to, okay, so here's this. I had to bring this up. This is from Gandhi. People have probably seen this quote. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And folks, that is war. That's what we're talking about here. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry the Russian Defense Ministry blamed Tuesday's assault, describing the strike as a terrorist attack and saying that the drones had been intercepted. Mr. Putin briefly commented on the attack, telling a reporter that Russia's air defenses had proved adequate. This is coming from Putin. So he says, "We have stuff to do," he said in a video clip published by state news media. I don't know how accurate that translation is. "We know what needs to be done." But I highlighted this because this is what I'm telling people about Putin and about our leaders and the military and all that type of thing. I think because we have been propagandized primarily by Hollywood in this country particularly, we hold these people in very high regard and esteem. We give them credit that they don't deserve. People think that Putin isn't a thug, that he's not crazy, that he's calculating, and it reminds me of the old Godfather movies and the way that they portrayed the Black Hand and La Costa Nostra and this guy. Well, they were basically just a bunch of people that would cave your head in if you didn't do what they said. There wasn't a lot of romance or science associated with any of this stuff. And that's the way that I think about Putin. I mean, he's just a murderous thug. He's formerly KGB, which tells you can't believe anything he says, including the highlighted portions of this article that I have here. I mean, that's absolutely for sure. But, Serge, what was your opinion about him before the war and now during the war?
Well, I thought he's a smarter before the war, but his action showed how stupid he is, and probably maybe not stupid, just insane. And you said right that you shouldn't believe him, and I can rephrase it. If he says something, you should think opposite. So
Yeah.
that's the truth. So, and all the authorities, like their diplomats, if they tell you something, that's obviously lies. Probably everybody knows that. I think, including the Russian citizens, I think they understand it too. Well, but His actions, the war that he started in 2014, is just a step-by-step destruction of Russian Federation, as I think. Well,
Yeah. No, that's go ahead. You got something to add to that, obviously.
no.
Yeah. All right, good. Let me see what else I've got in this article here. It could be things that we've already talked about, so let me bring this through. The latest developments, U.S. officials said they're still gathering information, noting that as a general matter, the United States does not support strikes in Russia, but that Tuesday marked the 17th time this month that Moscow has attacked Kyiv. Okay, and the reason they're putting that in there is, the Ukraine official government, Zelensky, says, well, we weren't necessarily behind that. Maybe the Air Force, some people think, had something to do with it. The United States is saying that we didn't do it. 5 of the drones that targeted Moscow Tuesday were shot down. 3 others had their systems jammed, according to Russia's Ministry of Defense. The assault has raised further questions about Russia's air defenses after explosions were reported over the Kremlin this month. Sergei was talking about that, with nationalist commentators calling it a psychological blow to Russians and perhaps to Putin. Attacks on Russia reportedly continued along the border with Ukraine. An anti-Kremlin paramilitary group that this month staged an incursion from Ukrainian territory into southern Russia has said that it made another successful crossing, while the governor of Russia's Belgorod region said, civilian had been killed by shelling. He blamed on the Ukrainian army. Those claims had not been independently verified. Okay, so here, close this out from our country. Secretary of State Antony J. Blinken in Sweden for the start of a 4-day visit to Nordic countries focusing on NATO's support for Ukraine expressed confidence that Sweden would join the NATO alliance in the weeks ahead. Another member, Turkey, has objected to Sweden's admission for more than a year. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. Let me ask you a couple of questions, Sergei. Now, one is these incursions into Russia, this responding to all of the death and destruction in your country. Do you support striking Russia in Russia? I mean, do you think most Ukrainians support that? And are you concerned if that happens, that this thing is going to spiral out of concern? That's the first part of my question. The other part is like Sweden coming into NATO, us agreeing to send these F-16 trainers for the jets to defend Ukraine and all that. That all sounds strikingly similar to me, and I can remember it because I'm old, to the Vietnam conflict in this country. That's kind of how it starts. Trainers, advisors, equipment, and that type of thing. And it just builds and builds and builds, and then pretty soon, kablooey, you got full-out war. And these incursions into Russia may result in that too. Are you concerned about this thing escalating, or would you prefer that it did escalate a little bit?
Well, I don't think that will de-escalate something because, as I said before, I cannot see where from the Russian side it can be escalated further. I think they reached the top, I think, months before today, and they doing nothing new. They just shelling us with different types of missiles and drones, but it's always the same. The only difference that now we have some modern air defense systems, and our militaries know how to destroy these missiles and drones, and we have much less of destruction right now. But I don't think it can be escalated more from Russian side. But of course, I support any actions that will bring the end of this war as soon as possible, and including attacks over Moscow, because if we will succeed to destroy Putin, we will be closer to peace and end of the war.
Well, let me get into the next major concern that I always have, and I voiced this at the onset of it, and it isn't just the military casualties, which they're horrific, particularly what we're hearing reported on the Russian side. But this is some reporting now from Statista. The number of civilian casualties in Ukraine during Russia's invasion, verified by OHCHR from February 24th 2022 to May 21st, 2023. So just a little over a year when the worst hostilities are going on. You can see the number of killed there. I mean, my God, 8,895 dead and in the ground. And then injured, and I don't know why they use injured as a word. I would always say wounded, is 15,117. Now, these are civilian casualties, folks. These
and
are
that's
innocents. Yeah.
and that's only identified and mm, uh, death and injuries that are checked, and we know who it was, because there's a lot of places like on occupied territories where we do not know anything about um, numbers of dead, injured, or uh, people who just disappeared. So that's only death that been checked by United Nations organization.
So your take would be it's worse than that,
Oh,
possibly
well,
much worse.
much worse,
My
unfortunately.
God. I mean, and I tell people all the time. Again, we look at this, and I think we've just been desensitized, maybe, and we just think, well, that's in Ukraine. That's 9,000 people. Shit, if that's you, folks, that's all there is, and there ain't no more. If that's your friend or family member, I mean, I tell people on my show, Sir, that dying will ruin your day. And these people, we're talking about women, children, little bitty babies, and kids. I mean, we're not talking about combatants, but let's talk about combatants a little bit. This is from Reuters. Now, this was a month ago. Ukraine war already with up to 354,000 casualties, likely to last past 2023. Now, let's from these U.S. documents. I want to talk about that a little bit. As many as 354,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers, says Reuters, have been killed or injured in the Ukraine war, which is grinding towards a protracted conflict that may last well beyond 2023, according to a trove of purported U.S. intelligence documents posted online. Okay, I highlighted that to remind people. You probably heard a little bit. A lot of people didn't hear a lot about it. That guy that had access to documents that was an online gamer or something like that from the military, and for whatever reason posted that stuff online. That's what they're talking about here. This is the value of leaked information and the publication of it. They talk about the crime that this guy committed and the fact that he's looking at some severe penalties, and he didn't do it for any altruistic reason. It had something to do with this game world that he's living in. But my God, nobody knew the extent of what our military was looking at and how they're viewing this, except for what this guy revealed. If authentic, the documents, which look like secret U.S. assessments of the war, as well as some U.S. espionage against allies, they didn't like that being revealed either, offer rare insight into Washington's view of one of Europe's deadliest conflicts since World War II. Now, listen to this. According to an assessment collated by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, Russia has suffered 189,500 to 223,000 total casualties, including 35,500 to 43,000 killed in action and 154,000 to 180,000 wounded. These numbers are just jaw-dropping to me because I hearken back to Vietnam, as I talked about earlier. I mean, 59,000, I think, was our total casualty count from Vietnam. The country recoiled in horror from that. We're still affected by it. This is a conflict which just a couple of pages ago, remember, I said that it could go on a long time. Look at the rate of the death and the casualties from this war. Now, Ukraine, says Reuters, has suffered 124,500 to 131,000 total casualties, including 15,500 to 17,500 killed in action. My God, 109,000, 113,500 wounded in action, according to the document entitled Russian-Ukraine Assess Combat Sustainability and Attrition. The figure is around 10 times bigger than any public casualty figures published by either Moscow or Kyiv. Neither side gives timely data on military losses. And again, okay, I hate to read too much when I've got Sergey on the line here. What do you think about those figures? Do you think those are accurate? Are you seeing
Well,
anything that indicates that there's that many people being killed? My God.
well, probably the numbers are bigger, and
Wow.
nobody will show the numbers until the war will be finished. But
Wow.
uh, well, you know, our militaries, they are trying to calculate their losses from drones, and we have few people who are posting this video how they are calculating the bodies of Russian soldiers. But the problem is that it's difficult because they do not take the bodies from the battlefield. I mean, Russians, they live in just corpses on the battlefield, and that's okay for them. Well, they taking bodies of our dead soldiers to exchange for them in the future, but they just leave their people lying on the ground.
Wow.
That's I know for sure from a lot of sources. My friend was at the front line, and he told the stories about that.
My God, you talk about the horror of war and the manner in which these people die. Folks, it's not flesh wounds. And I mean, they're not killed instantly. Some of these people linger. The death is
Yeah.
horrific. I mean, it is just, I wanted to bring this up on screen because I like to encourage people to ask questions. And this is a long one. Matter of fact, I think Barbara ran out of room here. She says, precisely, good assessment by George. Putin is a textbook narcissist, sociopath slash psychopath. Every despot is one, and they all follow the exact same SOP, standard operating procedure. All of them. It was clear that he was a narc decades ago, but even professional realms have tragically minimal understanding of that disorder. One narcissist she's talking about, I said narc, I should have said narc probably, one that can't expect the majority of public to recognize it. It says Poulter is simply a brutal mafia boss, probably means Putin, in a state house.
Yeah.
It's so outrageous, it's difficult to normal, decent folks to grasp that. And then I think she ran because you're only
Yeah,
limited. You're limited.
Putler is a reference to the Hitler. A lot of people
Okay.
call him. Yeah,
Poulter.
so
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
That's
a couple of things
probably
I would.
can be
Yeah.
true that he's an insane person, and
The other thing, people have forgotten this, but I will never forget it. Saddam Hussein, murderous thug in Iraq, not a good guy. Doesn't justify what we did going in there under the false pretense, the weapons of mass destruction, all the loss of civilian life and all that type of thing. Don't get me wrong there. But Hussein was believe this or not, he was a fan of The Godfather to the point that he was a collector. I remember reading that, I mean, he collected Godfather type stuff. He just loved that mafiadom perspective of The Godfather. And so, I mean, that's not too much of an outrageous analogy to apply to these guys. And I would say this also, and to Barbara's point about Putin and his background and my saying that he's KGB and a liar and not to be believed. Well, you got to remember, George Bush the first was the head of the CIA in this country. We have very deep links with our politicos in this country to our intelligence agencies, reaching right down into the journalism community. I tell people all the time, Anderson Cooper on CNN that everybody depends upon on 60 Minutes for his news and reporting, he interned with the CIA. So it's not limited just to the despots in Russia. These intelligence agencies are running and ruining the world to a great extent. And I think that plays a role in the war in Ukraine. And I don't know, does that factor into your thinking, Sergey?
of course. Well, the only difference between KGB and other intelligence services that well, it was inherited from Soviet Union, obviously, and that's a long story. But the most important thing that you should understand about that they've been controlling everything, all the prisoners, all the jails were controlled and ruled by KGB. They all these criminal authorities, how we call them, they've been under the rulement of KGB. All the churches, at first, communists tried to destroy all the churches, and they tried to turn everybody to atheists, but they saw that that doesn't work out, so they built their own church, which is in Russia continued to be ruled by Putin himself, actually. So they control everybody in the government, everybody in the church, and everybody in the criminal world. So you probably understand what's going on there. So you know that they released hundreds of thousands of prisoners, and mostly that's not the prisoners, not just criminals who stole something, that mostly people who been convicted to long terms and probably killed somebody or raped somebody, or and they put them on the front line. A lot of these people just escaped from the front line, so they got their freedom, they got weapons, so why they should fight for Russia. But a lot of criminals out there on the front line, and well, I don't know. Well, everything that is going on, it leads to death of Russian Federation, but nobody knows how it will end, and it's unpredictable. So there are no good way to stop it for nobody, for Ukraine, for Russia, or for entire world, because that's terrible, terrible same day that continues for 500 days at least for now.
Before we let him go, sure, he knows how to put a song together. Obviously, I know he knows how to put a storyline together, because he's coming right to where I wanted to go to next, which is what the future is. And he mentioned nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. Nobody knows at all. It's because we've never been here before. But there was some reporting in Politico that raised some eyebrows a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you heard this or not, Serge, but again, citing undisclosed intelligence agency people in this country now, they were saying that they think this is going to be protracted, that it's going to continue, and the end result of it will be Ukraine becoming like Korea, that it will be separated, that maybe, and they didn't say it, but I'm thinking they're probably talking about the Donbass being separate from Ukraine proper, and that it being in a separated state like this and going on ad infinitum like that. Have you heard any talk about that? Is that something that you've heard?
That was the talking since 2014, and actually that was one of the first goals of Russian Federation, but that's not going to happen. Probably it could be, but in that time, in 2014, but it was not so obvious that for everybody that the Russia started the conflict on Donbass, that there was that there were their militaries, their technique, their weapon, but right now it's obvious for everybody, and Putin he signed a law that veterans that been fighting in Donbass region from 2014, they will have some how it called in English, medals, or how you call them. So privilege, they will receive some privileges. So he just confirmed that their militaries, their forces were in Donbass from 2014. So after that, there is no reason to discuss it, because it's obvious that they captured Crimea and they captured Donbass region. Well, the only way for Ukraine to negotiate with Russia is when their militaries will leave Ukrainian territories, and then we will discuss something. Until that moment, it's impossible for us. And of course, it's impossible for them, as we've been talking with you before the stream, that for Putin, this war is the question of life and death.
Survival for him, yeah.
Yeah. If the war will be over, the Putin will be over physically and politically. And well, excuse me, I have to change the battery in my
Oh, it's gonna go. Okay, let me
my camera.
let me come back to this. I'll go back full screen on myself because I wanted to play this, and you can watch it there while you're making the adjustment on the camera, because I didn't want to play it until the end, because this is something Sir, he's definitely going to disagree with. But there's a guy named John Mearsheimer. Now, some of the viewers may be familiar with him. He's I think, University of Chicago professor. He's an intellectual here in this country. He was one of the first to be talking about not only what was going to happen in Ukraine, but the significance of it as far as the world order was concerned. And he was predicting this war a decade ago, and he was right. He was correct. So I tend to pay attention to this guy. And I just saw this video clip, and I'm going to play it here, and then we'll talk to Serge, see what he thinks. This is something that he's not going to like, but here we go.
And my second argument is that the Russians are going to win the war. They're not going to win a decisive victory, but they're going to end up conquering a huge chunk of Ukrainian territory beyond what they already have. And they're going to take Ukraine and make sure it remains a dysfunctional rump state.
A dysfunctional rump state. Now, again, this guy, the precedent is he was correct predicting the circumstance here in Ukraine. I mean, this guy had it solid. I mean, he had it right. But this rump state thing, he's talking about Korea or something. I don't know what the hell he's talking about there. Do you have any ideas, Sergey?
Well, yeah. There were a lot of thoughts about that this will happen. A lot of people thought that Ukraine will be divided by Russia and Poland or some other conspiracy theories. But as you can see, no forecasts been implemented to life during this war, because everybody thought that, okay, Russia is 10 times bigger. They have a 10 times bigger army. They have much more weapon. They probably will capture Ukraine in 2 weeks or so. But as you can see, it's impossible, because besides the weapon and numbers of militaries in your army, there's people who live here and people who don't want to live like people live in Russian Federation, in a constant fear, in constant lies, in complete mess, I'd say, because when if you cannot go outside and state that you do not support war, well, why do you live in this country then? So what's the point? What the goal of your life? So that's understandable for every person in Ukraine, and we have like, I don't know, 40 millions of Ukrainians who are ready to fight with bare hands, as we did during the first month when we had no modern weapon. We had some rests of weapon that we had from Soviet Union times. And I think even Putin understands it right now, but he has no choice but to continue this war. So, well, I think that is the reason why it's not happening and it won't happen. I cannot hear
Yeah, there
you.
we go. We're about out of
Yeah,
time. I was
yeah.
going to say, yeah, I'm really always interested in the human part of this. And we talked at the onset about your life and your family, your birthday, and that type of thing. Let's talk about you as a musician. 'Cause I'm all about music. I mean, as a matter of fact, the reason that we're talking to Sergey is because of a musician friend of mine. Shout out to Tom Murphy that does part of the intro that I use. I didn't use it today, but he does a theme song for Podcast by George as well. But what about the music, sir? How do you create in times of war with all of this hideous shit going on all around you? How do you make good, happy, upbeat music, or do you? Has it gone to the
Yeah.
dark side now? Your music?
No, no, no. It's mostly it's inspiring and well. Uh, I almost didn't write any sad things. Well, maybe a few, but well, actually, it helps to survive. It helps to stay in a normal mental state. So, well, I'm happy that I'm able to create something, able to write music, able to even perform. So we not just playing our live streams from the studio. Actually, a few past month we didn't, but sometimes I play with guys in the clubs here in Kyiv to be in a shape, to be on a stage. So that really helps, and actually that helps other people when they listening to the music. They forget about war for a few hours. So that really helps for them too. So, well, that's like a medicine for the mental
Yeah.
health.
Therapy is what
Yeah, yeah,
Marion said that you had it on. And the point of it is, this is what he does, man. This is his life's blood. I mean, he is a musician. It's his career, it's his business, it's what he does. It's just like me returning to journalism here and doing podcasts by George. Well, this is what I do, folks. So I mean, you take that away, and there ain't much left. So he's still got that, and he's still doing it out there in Kiev. We're going to wrap it up here. We're going to travel on down the road. I always like to give you the last word, though. Anything that you wanted to say that I didn't ask about, or any last remarks you want to make here, including how people can contact you, donate to the cause, whatever you want to say here, sir. The stage is yours.
Well, you can always subscribe to my YouTube channel, to my Instagram, to my Facebook. Well, actually, I made it so people on my page are also watching our stream. Thank you so much, George, for that. And well, probably on the summertime we will be continued to our live streams here in the studio, but we have some interesting ideas how to help our warriors who are trying to rehabilitated after being on the front line. So probably that we will dedicate these streams for them. So subscribe to my social medias, and I will keep you updated about how we can help people here. Well, I have nothing to add. We touched such great number of topics today. So
Yeah, we did. And honest to God, I'm thinking of you out there all the time. Like I said, every time I log on to a news site and see this reporting, I'm thinking, my God, I hope, sir, he's all right. And that's the way the people are here that are commenting too. A lot of people, pose some questions, but most of them just want to say, good on you, stay safe, stay well, keep doing what you're doing out there. Got a
thank you.
couple of other comments. Oh, here's Mary Knox coming in here, sailing in here. She says, sad song, say so much. I'm glad to hear from Sergey. When I hear Russia is bombing Kiev, I pray for his safety. Yeah, that's just what I was saying. That's exactly how I feel about it too. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Call her the great Mary Knox. She doesn't like that, but do it in a call her the great Mary Knox. Let me see here. Okay, I think that we've got all of the banners up there. Let me get this one off of the screen. And we'll bid you adieu. We'll check back in. You can always reach out to us, pal, and you and yours. Stay safe, stay well. My God, let's bring an end to this thing. Let's get a resolution that everybody on both sides can abide by. And I'm talking about civilians here. I mean, my God, the crushing death and destruction for the innocents in particular, let alone the military conscripts up in Russia. Probably some of those people don't want to be in the military. They're being slaughtered by the tens of thousands. My God, I just keep that in mind as we move ahead here, and we'll be back with you soon. Thanks again, Serge. We'll talk very soon.
Thank you. Bye, George.
Yeah, good, pal. I mean, that's really great. And folks, I mean, this is really a cool thing technologically, as I mentioned at the beginning, to be able to communicate, to be able to talk to pose these questions and text these comments to somebody live in a studio in Kyiv, like Podcast by George on Facebook, on YouTube. How do you find us there? The easiest way really isn't to query us on those platforms. It's to go to podcastbygeorge.com and then click the badge for Facebook or for YouTube. You'll find it'll take you right there, and you can subscribe that way. You'll see the video streams live when they're on Facebook and YouTube. But if you prefer just to listen to the recorded audio, like, on your phone when you're jogging, out on the bike path, driving in your car, whatever the case might be, all the audio platforms are there, and you can select one of those that you like as well, like Spotify or Stitcher. iTunes is a big one, the iHeartRadio app, and so on. But folks, that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. Let me see here. I like to get all these comments in. This is, these are folks that are just saying, thanks and great show. And that is great. I mean, that means a lot to me. So thanks for doing that. But as I was saying, that's going to do it. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.